Good morning, everyone. Before I start, actually, there's no before I start. I just want to thank Skip especially because Skip is really doing yeoman's duty here. He came in with flu-like symptoms, and he's doing the sound after he was here as the platform assistant. I just really want everybody to appreciate what Skip does for us every week. So as Reverend Bonnie said, the title of our theme for this week is Savoring All That Is. And when I first heard that, I was really intrigued and interested because savoring, for the most part, is about our senses of smell and taste. And in most of the messages that we have, most of the classes that we take or the books, they really concentrate more on the words that we use, or the pictures that we might make in our heads, or perhaps the feelings that those words and those pictures might give rise to. And those senses of smell and taste are often neglected. And I think it's good to be reminded in our messages to have a full body and a full sensory experience. And in fact, I think I said the title a bit wrong. It should pronounce it Savoring All That Is. When you say it right, savoring, you ought to salivate just a little bit, I think. The other half of that theme is all that is. And we've been reminded by many a teacher that they'll tell us that the past is over and it's gone, and the future doesn't exist yet, and all that is now. And that is certainly true. And it is also true that our memories of the past are still with us. And our imaginings about the future are here now. And so all that is includes those memories and those imaginings. I'd like to think about savoring for a minute. Think about savoring a really, really nice dinner. And you're savoring that main course. But that doesn't mean that your enjoyment of the appetizer that came before sort of vanished into the void somewhere. In fact, a well-chosen appetizer enhances your enjoyment of the main course. And just because you're enjoying the main course now doesn't mean you're not looking forward to dessert. All those things can be in the now, in the all that is. If you think about Eckhart Tolle, the champion of the idea of now, in his book, The Power of Now, the first thing he talks about is an experience that happened in his past. And if you go on his website, you'll see all the things that he's scheduled to do in the future. Or if you go on in England, you'll see the things he's scheduled to do in the future, I guess. Now, does that mean that he doesn't get it? I don't think so. I think it means that we don't get it if we think that to be in the now means to sort of get rid of all the parts of your brain that can remember the past or think about the future. And I don't think that's the case. First of all, I don't think we do that if that's what we had to do. And second of all, I think it's good that we don't have to, because treatment, spiritual mind treatment, is kind of about, ordering the next course. It's about what you want, what good you want to come up. Now, when Ernest Holmes talked about spiritual mind treatment, he called it as in addition to calling it that, he called it scientific prayer. As Skip says, I asked him to look for references to this process being scientific, and he came up with at least a dozen. And I don't know if that included all the ones where he referred to a mathematical certainty or a mathematical inevitability. And that's just in that one book. If you look in all his books, you'll see that comes up over and over. He did, after all, call his teaching the science of mind. And he called the movement religious science. And there are reasons for that. There's this idea of, as I say, a precision, a mathematical certitude that he was striving for. He sums it up in one of his books, and I couldn't find the reference, but he really sums up the whole process very nicely when he says, we resolve a situation into thought, and then we change the thought, and then, if we do it right, the situation changes. And he compares it to the working out of a law in the same way that when we turn on the switch, the light goes on. It's that automatic. It is that dependable. So I'd like to I'd like to say that, and he talks about that metaphor of a light switch many times in this book. It's that inevitable. Is that, I forget the words that in the reading, that precision, that process that is dependable. He talks about that a lot. The other metaphor that he uses a lot is that of planting seeds. Right? You'll see that over and over again in this book, planting seeds. And that's certainly a metaphor that Randy Granger, we have a lot of Randys around here. I had to keep which one in our head. Brown, right? Yeah, okay. Randy Granger talked about last week, very effectively, I thought. And when Ernest Holmes was first teaching, it was about a century ago, and I think about half of the country, half of the population of the country at that time was still agricultural. And so every other person was working on or near a farm. And so that was part of their day-to-day life. And that's not the case anymore. And so I think maybe we can use some new metaphors. So I think it's time for religious science to go digital. Now, what does digital mean? You hear it all the time. You know, you have digital movies, you have digital music. What is digital is real simple. It's just digits. It's numbers. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in the electronic equipment, it's even easier. It's all just zeros and ones. All the digits are just zeros and ones on your hard drive. Just a sort of a vast sea of zeros and ones that are the representation of your music, of your videos, of your email, and whatever else is on your computer. And that's all the digital means. But then there is the question of how do you go from music, let's say, to digital music. And there is, and this should echo Holmes a little bit, a precise mathematical transformation, a precise mathematical formula that does that. If you think about it, everything you see because of light waves, and everything you hear because of sound waves. And there is this precise mathematical transformation that can go from, no matter how complicated a wave form is, it can translate it into just a string of numbers, a sequence of digits. And those sequence of digits can then be stored on your hard drive, on a chip, on wherever you can store them. And the cool thing about this particular kind of transformation is that it's reversible, that you can then go from that string of digits and go back to audio or video or whatever else you have that you've stored digitally. And in addition to that, what's really cool is that you can, now the technical engineering term is monkey with those digits, those zeros and ones, to change it. So I'm sure you've all seen on movies or on TV shows how there's a blurry picture and they digitally enhance it, right? Or there's an audio with a lot of background noise and they digitally remove the noise. What they do is they change the zeros and ones so that those noises are out and so that the picture is clearer. It's, I think, a pretty cool thing. If you think about what they're doing, what are they doing? They're resolving the movie or the picture or the audio into digits. They're changing the digits, and then the picture or the audio changes. You resolve the situation into thoughts, you change the thoughts, and the situation changes. There's a really tight analogy there. And I was thinking about that and thinking about how to use that analogy in the actual steps of a spiritual mind treatment. Now, if you've not taken a class on religious science and don't know all the steps of a scientific prayer, spiritual mind treatment, this will be an incredibly brief introduction. Or if you have, it'll be an incredibly brief review. But it's something like this. Here's the way the analogy would work. Let's say you start with a movie, let's say, or an audio, and you translate it into these zeros and ones that then live on this vast sea of zeros and ones in your hard drive. What is recognition? The first step of recognition. You recognize that it's all mind, it's all spirit. The situation that you are treating about you recognize to be also a bunch of zeros and ones, kind of, in this universal mind. Okay, so now you've got your audio in zeros and ones, or your video, and you want to, as I say, monkey with it. Well, you don't look at the zeros and ones directly. You don't try and monkey with those digits directly, because it's not the way we're built. And so the good people at all the software companies have provided interfaces for us to deal with those zeros and ones indirectly. They've got, if you want to change the color of a picture or part of a picture, there are these sliders that you slide. I don't know if any of you used Photoshop or any other video editing things. You can use these sliders to change the color or to change the brightness, or really more detailed stuff than that. If you've got an audio, if you've got, let's say, some music, there are these what are called equalizers, where they say, I want less of the frequencies in this band and more of the frequencies in that band. You've got them probably on your car stereo. You've got them, they're everywhere now. So those are the things that you can use to address how to change those digits that are sitting on your hard drive. Well, that's what unification is. You say, all right, everything is mind, everything is God, everything is spirit, but how do I deal with that? You unify with it. And then you have that kind of interface with it so that you can work with it. Okay, so now you've got this nice interface, you've turned everything into zeros and ones. Now, what do? You monkey with it. That's exactly what you want to do. You want to change the picture, you want to change the audio, and that's what you do. That's the realization step. You're monkeying with things, so to speak, with the situation. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking, realization, where you make the thing real, realization, the way it's taught is simply a verbal affirmation, or it's simply, that's the way you can often do it. And I was thinking, when you're adjusting a video, sometimes you'll see this thing morphing, where one face becomes another face, or where a room full of furniture becomes a new room full of furniture. And I was thinking, that's really how realization, the analog that realization should be. And I was thinking, whatever happened to this idea of mental equivalence? Where does that fit into a treatment, a spiritual mind treatment? And that's where I think it fits in. That you're taking the mental equivalent of the situation as it is now. You've got a mental equivalent of that. You morph it into the mental equivalent of the way you would like it to be, what you're treating about. And then that's the analog of what you're doing in the computer. And I think that the words that are used in a realization step can be used to sort of guide that morphing, that transformation from the old mental equivalent to the new one. So, okay, so now you've been working on this picture, you've been working on this audio, you've got it the way you want it. What do you do next? Well, you hit print if it's a picture. You hit play if it's something you want to listen to. Or if it's an email, you hit send. That's the release step. That's all that release is. It's saying, okay, I'm done with it. I'm hitting print, and now the operating system is taking care of it. I'm out of the loop now. Or I hit send, and the internet has got the email now. I'm done with it. And so that's the kind of analogy that I think, if we work with that a little bit more, I've sort of like outlined it. I've sort of shown you how it can work. I think if we sort of look at innovation in religious science, we can look at how to firm that analogy up, and so that treatments will be more, as Ernest Holmes says, dependable, less capricious. He says we're not dealing with a capricious law. We're dealing with a law that's always there. And so that's how treatment can be like working on your computer. Anybody notice I left anything out? The Thanksgiving step, yes. I was wondering if anybody's going to shout it out, hey, what about this? But you're all polite. There is that Thanksgiving step. And I also left something out of the computer analogy as well. If I'm working on a picture and I got it the way I want it and I hit print, ain't nothing going to print unless I've hooked up the printer. If I have an email and I hit send, it's not going anywhere unless I'm connected to the internet. And that, I think, is what that Thanksgiving step does. It reconnects from the mental and spiritual mode of the situation back into the physical mode. It gives us that emotional link back to it. Now, last week, Randy spoke quite a bit about this Native American tale about how people forgot to be grateful for the crops that they were growing, and so the corn god just stopped caring, and so people had to remember to be grateful. And there is certainly that tradition in many religions to be grateful. But in this religious science step, it's tricky. It's a little bit different because as we're taught in foundations, back when I took foundations, I think it's still taught the same way in Beyond Limits, you're not grateful to someone outside of yourself. You're simply grateful for your good. I remember Peggy Shin saying she had a tough time getting that across when she was teaching it in Spanish, because the natural way to say it in Spanish is, pardon my Spanish, Deo gracias or something like that. And she said, no, that's not it. You're not thanking someone. You're just being grateful for your good. And I think there are a number of reasons for that, for making that distinction. One of them is that when we thank someone for something they've done for us, there is this sense of obligation, this sense of owing. Right? One of the ways you say thank you is, I owe you one. Or another way is much obliged. And there is no obligation with a spiritual mind treatment. You're simply using the laws that exist. I think another reason is if you're thinking of thanking someone outside there, that's separation. That's breaking that unification that is so essential to a spiritual mind treatment. And so, again, you're not thanking someone outside of yourself. You're simply grateful for what's going on. And a third reason is that you're using, as Ernest Holmes calls it, the law of mind in action. And I think it's the way to parse that is the law of mind in action, mind doing something. That's what the law is. It's an impersonal law. You may be grateful for the lights and the fans here, but you're not grateful to electricity. You're not grateful to Maxwell's equations, the laws that govern electricity. You're simply grateful for that. And so I think that's why we make that distinction. It's an impersonal gratitude, or another way to say that is it's appreciation of the good that you have. Remember, is it raining? Yes. Okay, appreciate that. I remember Reverend Bonnie a couple of weeks ago said we should give oneself over to the enjoyment of what is good. That's that appreciation. And I don't think I've ever heard a better example of that really heartfelt appreciation of something than all the treatments I've heard and anything else than when the whistle blows at the end of his shift and Fred Flintstone just says, "Yabba dabba doo." Is there anything more exuberant? Is there anything more of an example of that? I think you can just do that in treatment. Just when the Thanksgiving step, you say yabba dabba doo, and you're done with Thanksgiving if you really feel it. Because if we really think about it, what do we want our good for? Why are we treating for it? Why are we striving for it? We're doing that in order to appreciate it, in order to, as Reverend Bunny said, give oneself over to the enjoyment of it, in order to savor it. That's why we're doing that. That's what it's for. So in a way, that Thanksgiving step is why the whole treatment is being done. Now, I thought a couple of ways to how am I going to finish this particular message. And I thought of a few ways, and I saw this movie called About Time. And actually, the reason it first made me think of of these talks is when Reverend Bonnie talked a couple of weeks ago about how a particular sperm and a particular egg, how you're 1 in a million. There is actually a reference to that in this movie. Let me briefly talk about what the plot is. There's this young guy on his birthday. His father takes him into this study, and he says, there's this family secret that I have to tell you now that you're of age, and that is that the men in this family can travel through time. We can't go into the future, and we can't go like way into the past. We travel into our past. And really, if you see the movie, what they do is they travel in consciousness. It's not like the older version of them shows up. And we can go into the past and change things. And so most of the bulk of the movie is about how this guy goes through an event once, it doesn't turn out the way he wanted, and so he goes back and sort of molds his life. And at a certain point, after he has this young daughter, he realizes he wants to go back, way back in time, to like roughly the time that he first found out about time travel, to change something. And when he gets back, he sees that he no longer has this young daughter. There's this other kid showing up, because this particular sperm and egg combination is so rare and so balanced on all the minor conditions that you change anything before that and it's a different kid. And so that's why you can't do that if you like your kids, I guess. He didn't say that, but that was so that's what made me think of that movie. And then I just saw some quotes in that movie that I really want to end with here. It's toward the end of the movie. The father calls him into the study again, toward the end of the father's life, and he asks him, do you want to know the big secret? Not, hey, we can travel through time. That's not the big secret. Would you want to know the big secret, or would you rather find it out for yourself like I did? And the son says, why don't you just tell me the big secret? He says, so he told me his secret formula for happiness. Part one of the two-part plan is that I should just go on with ordinary life, living it day by day like everyone else. And then they show you scenes from a typical day where he's harried about this and hurried about that and worried about something else. And they show you that. And he says at the end of the day, it was a really tough day. But then came part two of Dad's plan. He told me to live every day again, almost exactly the same as the first time, with all the tensions and worries that stop us noticing how sweet the world can be. But this time, noticing. And so they show that same day again, and the same things are going on, but this time his attitude toward them is that of enjoying, savoring the good parts, the goodness of what's going on. So the movie goes on a little bit longer. He says, in the end, I think I've learned my final lessons from my travels in time. And I've gone one step further than my father did. The truth is, I don't now travel back at all, not even for the day. I just try to live every day as if I've deliberately come back to this one day to enjoy it, as if it was the full, final day of my extraordinary, ordinary life. And then he sums it up. He says, we're all traveling through time together, every day of our lives. All we can do is our best to relish, or might I say savor, this remarkable ride. And so it all is.